Good afternoon, everybody. I want to call back into session the November 22nd, 2022 Delaware County Board of Elections meeting. Thank you all for coming back together on such short time frame to reschedule. I think that where we left off, Mr. Allen, was that we were going to have a report from earlier today. It's my understanding that Judge Dozer has cleared the way both by written order and orally for us to proceed with the review and of the certification of the election.
That is correct, Madam Chair. This afternoon, we received a decision in a case that was brought very recently, the second of two cases that were brought since October 31st, having to do with questions about the testing process. And the ruling from Judge Dozer was that the testimony on behalf of the board and the election operations in general was candid, competent, and credible. And it was a complete vindication. And it was also a dismissal of all the major claims that ballots to unverified voters were mailed improperly, or that requests for mail-in ballots were deleted. They were not. And that after Election Day, registration records were deleted. They were not. And that partisan third parties in some way participated in the tabulation, which they did not. It was a 9-hour hearing yesterday. We worked mightily to try to set the record straight, and I think we achieved that as evidenced by Judge Dozer's decision. As I said this morning, the first and most important part of our business today is to recognize the outstanding performance of all the staff members across the voting machine warehouse, our bureau staff at the Union Power Plant, AKA the Wharf, our bureau staff here in media, and last but certainly not least, our voter registration team. Each one of them faced unique sets of challenges with this election, whether it was the implementation of Act 88 or the Supreme Court decisions that were handed down that changed some rules midway through the process and required us to go back and redo certain aspects of our work that was already completed very late in the process, as late as the Tuesday before Election Day, and then a refinement of that Tuesday decision as late as the Saturday before Election Day. And in spite of those challenges, this was, by all accounts, from our judges, our majority and minority inspectors, our clerks and machine operators, and members of both major political parties, the smoothest election that we've had. We had thorough testing of the ballots, the Election Day ballots at Phoenix Graphics as they were coming off the press, before they were shrink wrapped. We had extras and we had a scanner in official mode so that we could test those. We documented those. We ran tapes on those. All of the results came out 100%. Likewise, prior to the formal logic and accuracy per the directive from the Department of State, we had thorough testing of the absentee and vote by mail ballots. Then at the formal logic and accuracy testing at the voting machine warehouse, we were testing ballots off of the touch writers. And finally, at the logic and accuracy of both vote by mail and Election Day ballots and the central electronic tabulation equipment on October 27th, we had positive testing on that. The result of that was that whether it was the Election Day ballots, the envelopes that we put through 3 different rounds of testing to make sure that we had 2 sets of barcodes. One is a fallback in case they needed to be wanded in. The other was a 2D barcode on the back of every vote by mail and absentee envelope. and by replacing the old jogger equipment, and that's the equipment that looks like a mini bookshelf that settles the contents of each envelope to make sure that when you put it through the cutting equipment, it doesn't slice any of the ballots. The introduction of that new equipment was a success. We tested it beforehand, and it worked just as expected. We had far fewer issues with damaged ballots than any election before this, even though we had 61% turnout election. Moreover, our improved training and our improved training materials with detailed checklists allowed us to capture all of the appropriate return materials from the judges on election night better than ever before. There were 6 precincts where the initial read was that the judge did not return the Tyvek envelope with the 2 V drives, the one from the touch writer and the one from the scanner. In fact, they had delivered them. They had not delivered them in the way that we expected, but they were delivered all to the wharf on election night in 5 of those cases. 4 of those precincts are all in Glen Olden, and they all voted in the same gymnasium, and we think the teams just compared notes and they all did it wrong the same way. So it's a minor issue. 5th one was from Chester City, but again was in the green bag. The 6th one was one where we had to send staff out with a sheriff's deputy to retrieve the materials from the home of the judge who reported becoming violently ill late on election night and did not return any of the materials, so we had to have those retrieved entirely. So overall, this was the smoothest election that the staff executed very well in spite of the various challenges. Act 88 imposed a new challenge where we had to, on the one hand, perform a continuous count, going nonstop, running a marathon at the Union Power Plant. So once we started, we made sure to have as many things organized as possible so that once we started at approximately 7:15 a.m., we were able to keep going and have everything done for the most part, with the exception of the items that had not yet arrived but were legally eligible to be counted, namely the provisional ballots and the military overseas ballots, which can be evaluated up to a week after Election Day. We had everything tabulated by close of business late Wednesday, November 9th. Act 88 also required for the first time that we have an unofficial count at midnight of the vote by mail ballots, whether they were received by mail or drop box. This presented a challenge that we discussed before this board multiple times, before the county council, where we reconfigured the old system of having people simply shut down the drop boxes at 8 p.m. and then send out teams from the wharf to make the rounds and bring those back, to instead have those 40 teams who used to simply shut down the drop box to also remove all the contents, secure them, complete the paperwork for chain of custody, return them to a central location so that we could have one delivery to the wharf. It was very orderly, and we managed to meet the midnight deadline for getting the unofficial count of how many mail-in ballots that we had received, the unofficial count. So with that, I want to thank all of the poll workers. We had a full team, fairly full complement of poll workers who put in a very long day. There are certain things that we can refine. Instead of going to Rose Tree Park to return the materials, we had the judges of election return the materials here at the Government Center. Similar to what we experienced at Rose Tree Park, there's kind of a congestion period about 9:10 through 9:40 p.m. where we seem to get a surge of most of the, or roughly half of the judges all coming at the same time. So we're going to be working to have barcodes, QR codes, what have you, on the ballot bag as well as the V-Drive envelope so that we can scan those in more rapidly and get the judges in and out more smoothly so they can finish up their work and we can still have the necessary chain of custody. So with that, I just want to thank again all of my staff, the political parties who helped us sometimes line up poll workers where we had vacancies, the work of the return board, which finished their work in 3 days and completed all their tasks. As we know from this morning, the leader of the return board came and reported that everything was in order, that they completed all their tasks, and that we can move ahead with certification. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I won't speak long because it's a little awkward, I realize, remotely, but I want to echo what Mr. Allen said about the incredible election that was run by our team. I've gone so far as to say we might have the best team in the world, but I would like to certainly say we have an amazingly capable and competent and just hardworking team of election workers and those who step in for the day and those who are here year round and everything in between. We are so lucky to have such wonderful and competent people run such an amazing election, but the reason the election was smooth was because of the great work of our team, as Mr. Allen indicated. So thank you very much to everyone, those who work for the Bureau, but also those who volunteer for the day, those who sat for 3 long days at the return board. All of you are very much appreciated. Mr. McBlain, would you like to make any comments?
I'll have comments later on in the meeting, Madam Chair, but I want to echo your comments, certainly regarding the efforts of our staff and Mr. Allen and everyone involved. But that's all I have at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alberts?
Yeah, I'd like to, at the risk of sounding like an echo chamber, I want to echo a very particular aspect of the praise that Mr. Allen heaped upon our staff, all of whom deserve it. I've been working a long time on the partisan side, trying to find people to work inside polling places, and what I've observed over the past 20 years is a real decline in the sort of like grassroots volunteerism that I think was a bit more robust when I first started, and that's required us to pivot and to change our approach to how we staff those polls. And there's been a lot of things we've tried and a lot of things we've developed over the years. I think this year, particularly the efforts of the poll worker hotline, I saw it come together in a way that just absolutely astonished me. I drove around this county, and everywhere I went, I saw well-trained, well-staffed polls. I didn't see a single poll that didn't get the touch writer up and running, which was not the case in previous elections. So perhaps the most difficult technical task people were prepared for. I didn't receive a lot of calls from people saying that their judge of elections didn't know what they were doing. I mean, a couple times, sure. But by far, the best prepared, best staffed polling places I've ever seen. And I tip my hat to you because, as Mr. Allen knows, it's probably my biggest concern and the thing I pound the table about the most. So great job. And all of you who were still up working when I went home to bed at 2:30 in the morning, I'm so impressed by your commitment and your professionalism and your skill. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, is it time for the certification presentation?
Yes, at this time, I was hoping that the board, well, actually for public comment.
Okay, we'll start with public comment. Sorry, I can't see the agenda. Okay, Mr. McLean, I don't know if you saw my email to you, but I'm hoping that given I can't even see the room, I was hoping that you might run public comment if you would, so that you can call on people and have them speak.
Certainly, Madam Chair. So anybody has public comment, please approach the podium. And just for the record, give us your name and address.
Sure. Holly Rutkowski, 224 French Road, Newtown Square, PA. As a taxpayer in Delaware County, I am respectfully requesting that the costs of these continuous, frivolous, no substance filings and whatever that have been brought to the county over the last week and months, that we get reimbursed the costs of those, because they had no sound basis. And we should not let that happen. It's a bad precedent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Joyce Schwartz, 514 Lombardi Road, Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. And I observed, first of all, I want to say thank you also to all the election workers and also you, Mr. Allen. I know you work very hard on things, and it's very challenging. And I did see some improvements that were significant. I saw improvements in the way the V-drives are handled. I saw improvements on the return board. I did get to watch both the logic and accuracy test and the risk and the 2% statistical sample that of audit that the return board works on. However, in spite of everybody working so hard and things going very smoothly, I'm still concerned about the accuracy. That accuracy cannot be guaranteed unless there is foolproof logic and accuracy testing. Now, I saw logic and accuracy testing conducted in the warehouse, and I saw it conducted quite thoroughly on the ballots that were printed from the touch writer. However, I did not see any pre-printed, hand-filled out ballots tested whatsoever. I did inquire of Jackie Dunn, who appeared to run a huge operation very smoothly, but she could not. She basically told me that there were no ballots being processed or being tested that were pre-printed ballots that were filled out by hand. I also, after watching the logic and accuracy testing, I came back for a second day. This was on October 12th with binoculars, and noticed that on the touch writer was being tested in test mode when, according to the Secretary of State's directive, it has to be tested in election mode so as to best simulate a true election. So I was very concerned about those two matters. I also had the opportunity of watching the return board work, this was last week on Wednesday. They seem to have a very smooth operation going. Mr. Allen was there. Mr. Allen, you were so informative. You answered a lot of my questions. However, I saw their 2% audit that is required by the state statute performed. But there was no risk-limiting audit that I could see. And when I inquired of Mr. Allen about that, he was not able to really answer my questions. So if the logic and accuracy testing cannot be performed properly, and the risk-limiting audit is not performed according to the directives of the Secretary of State, I didn't make this stuff up. They're the ones that are telling us we need to do this. If we're going to use machines, it has to be done to the T. And I know it's burdensome. I know it's a pain in the neck, but that's the cost of using these insecure machines that many of us do not want because of the concerns that we have. Something else on the logic and accuracy testing. On October 12th, after I was at the warehouse, I wish that you would let me finish. I just have a little bit more.
Finish your thought.
Thank you so much, Mr. McBlain. After watching the logic and accuracy testing for a couple hours, I stopped by over at the wharf, and I basically went in. This is on. Oh no! I'm sorry. Let me back up. So I went to the wharf on October 27th. That was the day that the announcement said in the newspapers that there would be testing of the machines at the Central Counting Center. I did not come on time. I missed the actual testing. We had actually somebody else lined up to do that, and she had an emergency and could not be there. So I got there around 11:30, and I did speak to Mr. Wright, and I spoke to also to Ms. Hagan at that time. And I asked, so where's the logic and accuracy testing happening? I was told there's no logic and accuracy testing here. Logic and accuracy testing happens at the warehouse. Well, I knew that. So I asked Ms. Hagan, what are you testing? Or what did you test? And she informed me that the heart high-speed scanners were tested. I asked, how about the Blue Cross sorter? Was that tested? No, we didn't test the Blue Cross sorter. I said, how about some of the other machines? No, this is not LNA testing. She says this is basically, central machine testing. We don't do LNA testing here. I also inquired about the mail-in ballots when they were tested, and both Mr. Wright and Ms. Hagan thought that they had been tested, but
They had.
didn't seem to be sure.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I know Mr. Allen,
So the
addressed
central-
this yesterday.
I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, yeah, I
sort
know,
of let
I'm
you go.
going over. I understand, but my concern is that you can't certify.
Yeah.
You can't certify with these kind of issues
Ma'am.
still hanging around.
Ma'am,
Well, I don't.
ma'am, first off,
So, hold on, Mr. Allen.
Would you like me to sit down, or?
Let me, let me
Okay.
just, I know you were in court yesterday. I
Yes,
believe
sir.
you were. So I don't know how long you stayed, but
Whole thing.
we'll let you, you may have heard a very lengthy explanation regarding the testing from both Mrs. Hagan and Mr. Allen, but we'll let you take your seat, and I'll have Mr. Allen address
If
the
I may make one more
testing
comment on
issues.
that?
Quickly, yes.
So I was called as a witness, and I wanted to testify about these two matters that I just brought up, the logic and accuracy and the RLA. However, there was an objection to that based on hearsay, which was sustained, and that's the judge's prerogative, of course. However, it wasn't really hearsay because the two individuals who I had spoken to at the Central Accounting Center were in the room and were able to be cross-examined, and therefore I should have been allowed that testimony. So because I wasn't, I came here
Well,
today
Judge
to...
Dozer's up in courtroom 7. Why don't you go up and tell him he was wrong?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do
Okay,
that.
well then don't complain us here.
But I wanted to let you
Judge
know.
Dozer ruled appropriately,
Okay.
and I understand. But so thank you for your comments,
Thank you
though,
very
and I'll ask Mr. Allen if he wants to address any of that.
I do. First off, Ms. Schwartz, thank you for your kind remarks about the improvements that we've strived to make. And I just want to emphasize that you asked me those questions about the risk limiting audit last Wednesday. On Wednesday, the Department of State issued its news release saying that it was going to have its drawing to determine what precincts and/or vote-by-mail ballots would be required to be polled the following Thursday. That is why I did not have answers for you. The Department of State, I can show you the news release. It's probably out there on the Department of State website. It was widely announced to the news media. So yes, I did not have answers to that because we didn't know what was going to be polled. On Thursday, they did do the drawing, and then they didn't tell us what they were going to poll until Friday morning. We can show you the email. Then we performed the risk limiting audit at the wharf under cameras that are, it's all captured on film, and it came out 100%. They did a hand count, and forgive me, I believe it was Radner 3-1 or 3-1. There were approximately 500 ballots that were hand counted, and the only error that was discovered was an error in the hand counting, which I've told you about a number of times. What they did is they stacked, and there was one particular contest in the RLA that they were supposed to recount. So they put, if it was a vote for Smith, they put it in that pile. If it was a vote for Jones, they put it in that pile. If it was a vote for, and when they got done, they were exactly one off for one of the candidates, one too many, and one off. So they immediately went through those two stacks, and they found that human error accounted for the one mistake. And it was 100%. The tape from that precinct reported it 100%. Next, I don't know how many times I can try to explain this. I've explained it to you in court. You saw it yesterday. You were there. Twice I've explained it in court. I believe you were there also the earlier time. I explained it at October 25 when it was first asked whether or not we did testing of the Election Day ballots. And I had the materials there each time. They're still available if you want to review them. We tested at Phoenix Graphics. Phoenix Graphics prints ballots for various jurisdictions in Pennsylvania and New York, as well as other commonwealths and states. And they have informed me that we have the most exhaustive test. They wish their other clients did what we do. And we've heard that from every printer that we've used for Election Day ballots. So when I bring the materials to you, I show them to you. I had them in court yesterday, and you declined to look at them. I don't know what to say. There's not much more I can say. So just because you didn't see something happen doesn't mean it didn't happen. We've offered you also the vote by mail ballots that we tested on September 28th. Again, ran through the scanners, ran a tape on them, ran them through the scanners at the Union Power Plant so that we were using the real ballots on the real equipment that they would be used on the real election day. Everything came out 100%. We've got the tape and the ballots for those as well. So I appreciate your kind remarks, but as far as the RLA and testing the Blue Crest had already been in use for more than a month. So I'm not sure. We had already tested it. We had to test it way before the state even certified the ballot. And we did test a number of times the envelopes to come up with the barcode and the 2D barcode. So the vertical line style barcode in case we had to wand it in, and the 2D barcode. We didn't just develop that out of whole cloth. We developed that after testing throughout the months of August and September. We don't wait until until LNA time to do that.
Is there any further public comment?
Hi, my name is Karis Coker. I live at 836 Concord Road, Glen Mills. The magnitude of what is being weighed here is tremendous. To Mr. Allen's remarks, too much of what's going on is out of meaningful observation and being conducted without public notice and without proper observance by the public access.
Such as what, ma'am? I'm sorry. What was conducted without public notice?
Some of the pre-canvassing of ballots, I understand, prior to election, and some testing of equipment that was conducted prior to any observance being taken.
When was that conducted without public notice?
I do not know particularly. So, my remarks are in no way to cast a shadow on the dedication and the hard work of the people at the wharf, at the county courthouse, and the Board of Elections, and the people who worked on that day. I appreciate their volunteering. And I just want to say, particularly Crystal, in handling the provisional ballots. I was present for that, and she is on top of her game. And I appreciate such competence in the process. But the concerns, I feel that even the concerns that were presented in that hearing yesterday, as well as the concerns presented on November 3rd and 4th prior to the election, are of such matter themselves that it disturbs me, it concerns me very much that neither the court or this Board of Elections is willing to delay the certification in order to assure the public that they can truly have full confidence that their vote is recorded and tabulated as cast. I have concerns about the...
And what would you think would assure the public? I mean, besides all the public testing that has been performed, all the public notices that have been issued, the bipartisan cooperation of the return board, the praise that you give to the election staff and the election board members. You said you don't want to cast any aspersions or shadows on anybody, but yet you indicate it's there. So what relief exactly would you want to occur before there was any certification?
I'm not...
And what exactly do you think is incorrect about any of the returns?
My concern is what goes on in the ether world and the cyber connections, which are, there is, and there was another particular incident that was of great concern to me, and that was the lengthy layover at the flagship building, which was not mentioned anywhere in anything. There was no public access. And as a member of the public, when I closed out the poll, I was working down in Chester. I came up to the courthouse just to observe the dropping off of the B drives and the ballots. And when you go underground, I mean, that's not accessible to the public. Would I have been allowed in there as a poll watcher or even as John Q. Public? I don't know. I didn't try to go in there, but I did see the flashing lights of police vehicles guarding the flagship building on opposite corners of the building, and the large police presence inside the garage there. And obviously, there was something of great significance going on regarding the election that was not known to the public before and was not able to be meaningfully observed or even observed at all by persons concerned about the integrity of our election.
So you had attended, I think, some of our previous meetings. I'm not sure
Yes,
if you've
sir.
been at all the meetings, but
No.
you heard it discussed previously that the process had been changed this year for the return of the
Yes.
Dropbox ballots. We were using a different process where we were using teams to go out to each and every Dropbox instead of just one of a handful of teams
Yes.
to do that, and that they were returning those Dropbox ballots to the flagship building, which is
No,
a
that I
county-owned
missed.
building.
If that was known publicly before, it was not very well
And you were in the
known.
courtroom yesterday, ma'am, right?
Part of the time.
Part of the time. You might have missed the point where Mr. Allen testified, and he talked about how that had been discussed previously at these meetings.
Well,
So,
I do not remember the flagship building being discussed at all in relationship to the election. And there was, if anyone had desired to go into that building, it would have been a rather threatening approach.
Ma'am,
Yes, sir.
just to be clear, the flagship building has a street-level parking garage that you can pull through
Correct.
from Baltimore Pike and then on to Franklin. So at no time did any materials go into the flagship building. None of the staff who were there had access to the flagship building. They had basically cars at street level pulling through, and for obvious reasons, to avoid any kind of traffic tie-up, and to provide police escort to the van as soon as they were done. We had media, we contracted with Media Borough Police to provide traffic direction and security, and then they accompanied the van to the wharf. So we had, as a result, the Dropbox ballots to the wharf facility earlier and more quickly than ever before. So there was never an air gap in between when they sealed shut the equipment and then a team would get out perhaps to Chad's Ford 2, 3, 4, 5 hours later. Now we had the same people who were locking it shut immediately emptying it. So that also helped eliminate the questions, well, were any of those ballots inserted perhaps around, the lock shut, they call it the kiosk blocker or the kiosk, closing device. So that also eliminated the prospect of any envelopes getting into the Dropbox after the appointed closing time, which is 8 p.m. So we got them to the wharf faster. We did it more securely. We had one centralized location in Media because we didn't think people from Radnor would, or from, other far ends of the county necessarily want to go all the way to the southern tip to bring them. And we didn't want to have 39 vehicles, 40 vehicles coming to the wharf, to the loading dock. We wanted one. We wanted one orderly, and it was all on the floor by 10:30. They had it run through the Blue Crest. I was getting a little nervous. Right at about, I think we got the last envelope through the Blue Crest at, 11:55? So I was glad that it worked as well as it did, but I was also a little nervous because we had a midnight deadline, period, end of story. But we did have them there sooner than ever before.
Well,
So you've gotten the explanation now, and certainly if you're not able to attend meetings, these are all broadcast or recorded, so you can catch up on the information that way. In regards to the netherworld affecting the election, I can't help you there. You're on your own on that one.
well, let's look at the matter of the mail-in ballots and of the lack of proper validation of those ballots and to ensure that they're coming from a legitimate voter in a legitimate area. That is
Well,
a
once
matter.
again, I know you attended part of the hearing yesterday. You indicated there was a lot of testimony presented in that regard, and the judge specifically ruled on that, that the county follows the proper procedures for the processing of the mail-in ballots. So hopefully your fears are assuaged now.
Well, I will close with this. I'm reminded with the first flag that was used in our Revolutionary War, and that was, well, I guess that was after the Bedford flag, but it was called the Washington's Cruisers flag, the appeal to heaven. And there is a higher court, and there's a higher judge before whom each of us will answer someday. And so we will, while we continue to make efforts to clarify and to clear up the concerns we have, we'll take our case to the higher court.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello?
Chris Fabre, 7103 Sellers Avenue, Upper Darby. I'd like to say thank you to all the poll workers. I know they do work hard. You know, I went around on election day and visited a lot of the precincts and just to see how things were going. And for the most part, I met, you know, Mr. Alberts there. For the most part, I didn't see any problems there, you know, but I do have some questions, naturally. You know, you wouldn't expect anything less from me, right? Real quickly on the flagship drop-off, I don't recall hearing about that prior, and I've been to a lot of these meetings, and when I did hear that ballot boxes were being dropped off there, I was sort of concerned. So that, I'm going to say that in passing, okay? I don't really want to get into a discussion with it right now. My question is on the review board. I was there, I guess it was Thursday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay, thank you. And then I also went the next day to see how the follow-up with the final report was done. My question is, who completed the report and when was that done? So, was that done by the board? Was that done by the BOE, et cetera? So.
There's a compilation of the documents from the return board. There is no formal report that's prescribed by law, that's suggested by law, that's required in any way, shape, or form, and those are available.
Okay, so we won't see a report that the review board...
We had a verbal report this morning by a member of the return board who said that they completed all their appointed tasks, that it went more smoothly than ever before, that we created new forms. You had other observers there as well, and I think you know from seeing when I was there, there was a concern expressed earlier this summer that somehow we were going to try to control the work of the return board, when in fact, basically I ran down a midway between the tables on the left and the right side of the room and fielded questions and/or the warehouse staff retrieved materials promptly when they needed, for example, like the spoiled ballot envelope, the number looked a little, you know, high and might account for the difference. They were able to retrieve that, get it over, and a lot of times it solved the, it changed it from being a discrepancy to being 100% balanced. Little things like that.
Okay, so there is no formal written report that the public could see on that?
We can prepare one. I mean, we had to prepare a supplement to the last one because the last one was inaccurate, incomplete, and it took extra number of weeks for them to complete. So we ended up having to go through during the summer months, and it was very educational for, I don't want to speak, well, I will speak for voter registration and the Bureau, who previously had not been involved in any way, shape, or form with the activity that had been kind of siloed at the voting machine warehouse. And after going through that, and finding that we were able to resolve the questions that the return board kind of threw up their arms on 106 precincts. We resolved all 106 because we have additional resources such as the blue poll book. So if the numbered list is not there, we can go to the gold standard, which is the numbered list where every voter signs in, not the numbered list, the blue poll book, which every voter signs in before they receive their ballot. We have, other documents such as that to go through. So it was a learning process for all of us as we went through and we found answers, and we gave that report to the members of the return board saying, hey, if you have any questions, let us know. And on top of that, members of the return board then asked for a meeting with me where we discussed everything from what they didn't like about the building.
Is this for this election? Or?
For this election. So they met with me, I want to say it was early October. They made some suggestions. I had follow-up meetings with Jackie at the warehouse. We reformatted the forms so that they were clearer and you could easily go from the return sheet to the form to being able to reconcile it or recognize any kind of issue. And overall, it went well.
So I guess, yeah, like I say, the bottom line, it was be nice to see a report, physical report for the public.
So I think what I used to call the tabulations, I don't know
That's what I'm going to call it.
I don't know what we call them now.
It's the technically in the law, it's the retabulation.
The retabulation. So the retabulations, the calculations that are done by the return board, those I believe are open to the public inspection. If anybody wants to take a look at it. I think what you're talking about perhaps is in the fall of last year and the spring of this year, there was an attempt to put together kind of a narrative letter from the tabulators. I haven't seen that. That's not required. That was an effort that some of the tabulators put together to make suggestions, and I welcome that sort of thing, just speaking for myself. But thus far, I haven't seen any sort of narrative letter that's been written so far for this one. But all the tabulations, all the calculations, that's all open to the public.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is there any further public comment?
Yeah, my name is Carl Bayless. I'm from Glen Olden. I just wanted to second the sentiments expressed by the first speaker, I think it was Holly Ruskowski, about the county possibly filing frivolous prosecution lawsuits to recover the money that's being spent on these lawsuits. I know to date there's been many of these lawsuits, and every one of them has been soundly rejected by the judge that heard the case. There's never been any real evidence of anything. And while the past is finished, if this continues, on and on and on and on, one after another in an endless string, the county has to get their money back. There's no reason we should bear the cost of this. So I would very seriously consider that. It's certainly a legal standard. It's a real violation of law to file frivolous lawsuits. And when you present no evidence time after time, it's fine. You want to pay the bills? You can have 1,000 lawsuits. You pay for them, not us. And one thing I would suggest is that maybe you can make public how much money to date you have spent on these, defending against these lawsuits. I think taxpayers have a right to know. Let them see what they're spending. Let them make the decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
Hi, my name is Julie Yu. I live at 1228 Darby Road, Havertown, PA 19083. Forgive me, this is my first time speaking. Transparency. We are a nation divided. We have been, we are, with probably 50% or more on one side, and a lot of us believing that there are issues with election integrity. That's not going to change unless there are changes made. Whether you want it to go away or not, it's not going to change. There's a lot that needs to be done, but one thing that needs to be done is transparency. Setting that aside, I was a witness in a court case the 9-hour circus ring that we had yesterday. That I say circus ring because I feel like the judge only humored us, letting us vent and get everything out so that he could say, oh, I heard what they had to say. But we were limited in the evidence that we wanted to present. And perhaps we'll have to take that further, and perhaps we are. But because I was a witness on November 8th, the last day of the election, I had volunteered to watch those drop boxes. I followed just to make sure they were secured and they were locked. And I had a few concerns regarding that. As you know, as you guys were there, I have followed the 2 county employees who had the ballots in their truck up to the flagship center that we were not made aware of. Now, I heard you say that that was brought up, but from my understanding and from a couple other people that have spoken here, they never heard you mention the flagship center. Now, mentioning the flagship center, that you may want to purchase it is not the same thing as saying we're going to use that facility. I know you have a website. None of us liked being in that court for 9 hours yesterday. And perhaps we could have eliminated one aspect of that had you been more transparent. Had you posted on your website, hey, community, we're going to use the flagship center. From my understanding, this was the first time that we had observers at the government shipbuilding for the precinct ballots to come in. And it was like fighting tooth and nail just to get that information. So the fact remains that you guys took the community, the county's ballots for these drop boxes into a place that we were not aware of, where we had no observation. And of course, what do you think that's going to create? That's going to create suspicion. Not only that, after the day of election, we went over there and we checked the dumpsters. There were boxes everywhere, empty boxes without the labels of, you would think the people that rent those buildings.
So what's your accusation, ma'am?
Huh?
What is your accusation?
It leads to suspicion, and it leads to more suspicion, and that's the whole point. If you guys don't want to have these meetings or be accused of things, then you should have been more transparent in saying that, in posting that you were going to do this, so that we could have had observers there watching. I went up and I talked to the police officer there. I said, do you have those observers there? He said, no. So, and that's on video. So, not only that is the 2 county workers that put these ballots into their car. I watched for 4 minutes them struggle with a zip tie. I also have her on audio saying 4 different times, it's good enough. Now, I know that you have no control.
So why don't you finish your thoughts?
You have no control over, you provide training and then you can't micromanage all of these people. But we, as a community, we don't want these ballots that have mail-in ballots, these boxes, going into county workers' vehicles that are probably more likely on one side of the party, unzip-tied and unsecured. Because again, that leads to suspicion when that stuff gets out.
You were able to follow this car directly from the Springfield drop box based on what you discussed yesterday
It's on video
to
too.
the flagship building.
It's
Am I
on
correct?
video too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a huge concern, things like that. I would just ask that you can be more transparent. And because there was no one to observe, there's also in this building that you said the parking lot goes around, there's also a whole other parking lot on the side that goes deep down underneath there.
We did not use that.
We don't know that because there was no transparency.
Well, I don't know that we agree with your remarks regarding transparency. It was called in court yesterday by the judge a citizen army of people that help to conduct elections. You raise an objection about sworn county employees who transport the ballot boxes back and forth, yet you don't raise at all the fact that there are 400 plus judges of election that transport ballots, from the polling place to the county. So we have this citizen army that performs these tasks. I'm sorry if you weren't able to come to previous meetings or watch previous meetings where, this process was discussed. If you were in court yesterday, you heard a full explanation from Mr. Allen regarding that, and I would invite you to please review the judge's order where he indicates that, despite the testimony that you and others tried to provide, there was absolutely no evidence of fraud. There's no evidence that there was any impropriety. There's no evidence that there was anything undue, and you haven't pointed to anything there. So we encourage you to continue to come to our meetings. The more the merrier, and be attentive and listen to the things that are announced and the things that are discussed by the election director. And if you do that, I think a lot of the issues that you've talked about here today would be resolved. So thank you.
We meet again. I'll be,
Can you give us your name and address?
this is Gregory Stenstrom, 1541 Farmers Lane, Glen Mills, PA. I saw most of you yesterday. I was the plaintiff in the suit. I'll be brief. I have a prepared statement, so it won't be rambling. Just a few minutes to enter some things on the
You
record.
have 3 minutes.
The BOE conflates and confuses the difference between winning and declaring a winner and saying there's no evidence and evidence. We conducted 3 hearings now on the 3rd, 4th, and the 21st. 2-hour hearing, 2.5-hour hearing, and a 9-hour hearing yesterday. We have CDs from all of them, and I wanted to respond to the one woman who said, the reason we're here and we continue to have these problems is if you followed the law, which we brought up, there would be no lawsuits. So the whole point we're doing these things is you're not following the law. And you keep saying the suits are dismissed, but the underlying complaint, you said the injunction was dismissed. The underlying complaint remains intact. And regarding fiduciary duty, the gentleman just asked what the cost will be. We're going to soon find out, and he'll be getting that information. I learned last time not to direct you and not to him, but you'll be getting that number, sir. So our cases aren't dead. The remaining case remains intact to be heard soon with several hundred pages, and now we have 14 hours of testimony and evidence, which you say there isn't any, but there's quite a bit. Our Commonwealth case is in motion. The Commonwealth Court already heard our previous cases and dismissed the sanctions because they said our cases weren't frivolous. And you know that, Mr. McLean. Our SCOTUS case was submitted today. So there's 3 cases in the trajectory that, the continued claims by the board and the council that we've been dismissed are false. So what we did yesterday, what we proved is the county BOE solicitors, plural, ordered the Bureau of Elections workers to send mail-in ballots to 25,000 unverified voters, and we resolved the difference between registered voters and verified voters, and they're not the same. So we verified you broke the law there, and we proved that in court yesterday. The fact that the judge says that wasn't evidence doesn't mean we didn't prove that you sent out 25,000 ballots. We proved that LNA testing was not conducted in accordance with the law and was run in test mode instead of election mode, and which breaks the forensic chain of custody and makes it impossible to determine the pedigree of the vote, which was a break in the law and what we went for. Our certified forensic witness was excluded because we didn't have a paper resume, and his verbal offer of proof, which is allowed by law, that he was a certified expert, a certified legal expert, a certified witness, he was a graduate of Drexel and the Naval Postgraduate School, were not enough. Had he been allowed, he would have stated the election cannot be certified for a number of reasons. One was that the hash codes weren't there, and he would have testified that the election can't be certified. And that evidence is being used in multiple states, including Arizona, Michigan, Mississippi, and other states you're going to hear about this week. They're going to decertify votes for that reason. Our professional accountant with 30 years of experience and the former CFO, I only have 2 paragraphs.
Okay, finish up.
Thanks. Our professional accountant with 30 years of experience and a former CFO of Condé Nast, and who owns her own accounting firm, was excluded from testifying that 2,700 records have been deleted from the Department of State database because they said that election numbers were different than other numbers. We also proved that elections are a process and not individual discrete events. And quite frankly, the one I wanted to do was the verification of Phoenix graphics, which Mr. Allen has brought up multiple times, is specifically not allowed by law. That is not the law. The law says that those ballots have to be certified by observers. He admitted himself that Act 77, or he said Act 77 and other instances in the law have required them to move the timelines around. And nevertheless, while it was a plausible explanation, and we didn't challenge that, nevertheless, it's a break in the law. And that's the reason we're here, and I appreciate the time here. I wanted to set the record straight and, or set it the way we were. And the fact that you guys keep saying there's no evidence doesn't mean there isn't any. Thank you.
sir.
If I may.
Sure. I didn't, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you very much. I didn't know, Madam Chair, can I beg your indulgence? It may be instructive for the people that are in the audience and also those that are following at home if we actually read the court's order from the hearing yesterday. It's only about a page and a half, I think. I don't know if Mr. Centrale, you have that. Well, okay, if you pull that up.
I think that I've read it. I think that would be fine if we read it for the public record in case everybody doesn't have access to it.
Yeah, perhaps Mr.
Document that was
Centrale,
emailed to us earlier today? Is this the
Yes.
document that was emailed to us earlier today?
Yes.
Yes.
This was just, I think it would be instructive. People make claims, the petitioners have made claims. We just heard some public comment about that, but so that the public understands, perhaps we can read the actual text of the order.
Yes, Mr. McBlain. My name is Nick Central. I'm currently standing in for Board of Elections Solicitor Manley Parks. I'm counsel of the board. This is the order that was entered earlier this afternoon at approximately 12 o'clock by Judge Barry Dozier of this court related to the hearing yesterday that's been mentioned. And it reads, "And now, this 22nd day of November, 2022, upon consideration of plaintiff's emergency motion for temporary restraining order pending hearing for preliminary injunction, defendant's opposition thereto, and a hearing thereon, it is hereby ordered that said motion is denied. In support of the foregoing, the court hereby sets forth the following. 1. Plaintiffs failed to establish any of the 6 elements required by Pennsylvania law to obtain a preliminary injunction. Those elements include 1. That an injunction is necessary to prevent immediate and irreparable harm that cannot adequately be compensated by damages. 2. That greater injury would result from refusing an injunction than from granting it, and that issuance of an injunction will not substantially harm other interested parties. 3. That a preliminary injunction will properly restore the parties to their status as it exited immediately prior to the alleged wrongful conduct. 4. That the party is likely to prevail on the merits. 5. That the injunction is reasonably suited to abate the offending activity. And 6. That the injunction will not adversely affect the public interest." Paragraph 2 states that this court finds the testimony provided by both the Chief Clerk of the Delaware County Board of Elections and the Delaware County Director of Election Operations to be candid, competent, and credible. Paragraph 3 reads as follows. The testimony of both the Chief Clerk of the Delaware County Board of Elections and the Delaware County Director of Election Operations revealed the ballots cast in person at polling places in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, were secured by the local judge of elections, sealed, and brought to the Delaware County Government Center before being consolidated by county employees and driven to the Wharf Building to be counted. Ballots collected through drop boxes, on the other hand, were collected by county employees at each drop box and driven to the Flagship Building for consolidation, before being transported to the Wharf Building for canvassing and processing. This process, by which in-person and drop box ballots were consolidated with other in-person and drop box ballots, helped to avoid confusion and potential mixing of different types of ballots. In other words, to ensure the integrity of the election. Paragraph 4. The chain of custody of ballot bags, ballots, V-drives, and electronic paraphernalia to the Voter Services Center and the centralized counting center at the Wharf Building in the city of Chester is found to be safe and secure. Paragraph 5. This court finds the testimony offered at the November 21, 2022 hearing confirmed the integrity of the ballot verification and identification process the pre-canvassing efforts on Election Day, and ultimately ballot security. Paragraph 6. Moreover, plaintiffs failed to provide credible evidence to support the following averments. 1, ballots to unverified voters were mailed, returned, and counted. 2, that at least 2,778 requests for mail-in ballots were deleted. 3, that after Election Day, at least 194 voter registration records of individuals whose mail-in ballots were counted in the vote were also deleted. Or 4, that partisan third parties controlled the tabulation of the mail-in ballots. Paragraph 7. After 3 separate motions and almost 9 hours of testimony, plaintiffs are unable to demonstrate a clear right to relief or likelihood of prevailing on the merits because the underlying emergency petition, although styled an emergency motion for temporary restraining order pending hearing for preliminary injunction, is really an improper election contest and is therefore denied. Signed by the court, Barry C. Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Ciccone. And Madam Chair, that concludes the public comment section, and we're up to agenda item 6, the certification of the results.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Allen?
Madam Chair, members of the Board of Elections, I would ask that you please make a motion at this time to approve the certification of the computation of the election results from the November 8, 2022 general election for Delaware County, Pennsylvania.
I'd like
Do
to
we have a
introduce that
motion?
motion.
Oh, sorry.
I'll introduce that motion.
I'd second the motion.
Any additional comment from the board? I'll start with Mr. Alberts. Mr. Alberts, any comments before we vote?
I don't think I have any. I think it's pretty clear what's going on here, and I think we feel pretty confident, even if some do not. We feel confident that we're ready to proceed with certification.
Mr. McLean, any additional comments? I appreciate your comments during public comment, and thank you for facilitating that. It was very hard to do. It would have been very hard to do from here.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Mr. Alberts, and again, I reiterate that we had Ms. Headley, who was one of the, I think we called them the group leaders. There was one from each party from the return board was at the meeting this morning at 9 o'clock, and we did have a little bit of back and forth with her regarding her opinion on that, and on behalf of the return board, she recommended and thought it appropriate that the results be certified.
Agreed. Thank you, everybody on our team, our staff, the return board, all of our board members, the solicitor who's spent many hours in court, Mr. Allen, Ms. Hagan, Ms. Winterbottom, Ms. Dunn. We appreciate all of your efforts. I have no additional comments. I think I agree with everybody that a lot has been said. I appreciate, Mr. Central, you reading the decision of the court. And with that, I'm prepared to ask us if we have all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
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 With that, Madam Chair.
There's a delay in time.
With that, Madam Chair, I would like to circulate for signature during the open meeting with the other board members, and also ask your permission to electronically affix your signature to the certification.
Yes, I just want to be clear, because of my remote status, I will be signing by hand. I can return that for your safekeeping after the hard copy that I will be wet signing after I receive the electronic signatures that will be hand signed in the room today by Mr. McLean and Mr. Albert. So does anybody have any objections to that from the board, that procedure going forward, or Mr. Centrell?
I do not.
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Allen, are you going to circulate this now? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Madam Chair asked for a vote, and all voted aye. And Madam Chair, members of the board, let the record reflect that you've signed for the results from the general election for all the offices that were scheduled to be on the general election, as well as for the special election in Haverford Township, 1st Ward, for the office of Commissioner to fill a vacancy in office.
Thank you. It appears we have I understand we have a quorum of signatures on the paper. It will also be transmitted, and I will be signing that shortly after this meeting adjourns. Is there any other items up for the agenda?
Madam Chair, we had tentatively scheduled November 28 as a contingency meeting. Contingencies are something we have to build for in every election. I had the unusual circumstance this election of a high school that had 4 precincts and receiving a call where there was a fire alarm going off, and they did not know what to do. And we had a contingency plan for that, and everything was kept intact. Unfortunately, there was no fire, there was no smoke, and they were able to, after initially evacuating some of the poll workers and the voters to be safe, return to normal business in those 4 precincts. So I'm pleased to report that, like the fire alarm that went off and was a false alarm, we will not need to meet on November the 28th.
Thank you. Then we will be announcing, I assume, our next meeting will be publicly announced as appropriate, consistent with the statute.
Madam Chair, would it be appropriate for any other board comments at this point in time?
Yes, Mr. McLean, if you'd like to proceed, please do.
May I be recognized?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Alberts. I thank you for your indulgence to make some remarks, but I felt it was important to do so regarding the recent court challenges brought against the Board of Elections and the staff members of the Bureau of Elections. Initially, I want to note that it is the right and even the duty of every American to scrutinize and question their government, from local school boards and borough councils through to the conduct of the President of the United States. Our Declaration of Independence from imperialist England declared that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles. In the shadow of this grand principle certainly exists the right of the various citizens of Delaware County to aggressively scrutinize the work of this board. As more than any other, this board governs the process of the democratic selection of our elected representatives, the foundation upon which our government rests. In many years of government and politics, I have served in the role of both protestant of the government's activities and defender of the policies and procedures instituted by government. Last year, in the wake of the national debate on the integrity of elections, and in particular questions that arose here in Delaware County, I agreed to submit my name to the County Council for consideration of appointment to this board so that in some small way I could contribute to the healing of the divide. Upon my appointment, and recognizing that I am the political minority on the board, I vowed to scrutinize and question our practices and procedures to ensure we met not only the letter of the law, but the high standards our residents expect. Like my fellow members of the board, I have spent an extraordinary number of hours learning, examining, and questioning our practices and procedures. I can say with the utmost confidence that elections conducted in Delaware County are fair, accurate, and conducted in accordance with Pennsylvania law. Under this administration, as with past, I believe that the employees and staff not only are educated in their positions and particular with their work, but also committed citizens who recognize the special importance of their work and who strive to do their duty well because of it. In this context, I wish to address one of the most recent court challenges. In those challenges, the other board members and I are accused of intentional violations of the law, which violations carry criminal penalties, as well as other violations of our statutory and fiduciary duty to our residents. I say to the residents, these claims are false, were made without a scintilla of evidence, and have now been conclusively found by the court to be untrue. The petitioners who made these claims made similar claims following the 2020 election. This particular duo has apparently turned their false claims into a bodega of election conspiracy claims, peddling their theories in return for internet contributions and book signings at mid-state county fairs. For 2 years, we have heard refrains from the duo that all they need is a court to hear their evidence, that they will name names and explain the mechanisms of fraud that allows hundreds of thousands of votes to be swapped and switched. Yesterday, this duo had the opportunity for 9 long hours to present all their evidence and theories to the court in a hearing that lasted from 11 a.m. until after 8 p.m. here in this courthouse. I felt compelled to attend and hear this elusive evidence that would finally explain how tens of thousands of votes in Delaware County are manipulated and how exactly I and my fellow board members had intentionally violated the law. And there was nothing. For 9 long hours, nothing. With 2 years to prepare, it was apparent that this duo was so unprepared, any high school mock trial team would have rejected their work. Despite extraordinary latitude given by the judge, there was zero evidence of any fraud or violations of the election laws presented. Incredibly, at one point, one of the petitioners admitted that they had no proof of fraud and then tacked on their theories to ask that they simply be permitted to engage in a huge fishing expedition. Incredibly, one of these petitioners failed to even put their hand on the Bible and provide any sworn testimony regarding the alleged fraud they uncovered over 2 years. Although shocking, this is unsurprising because these petitioners have consistently failed to follow the election laws related to their rights to challenge ballots or even examine reams of paper evidence that has been set before them even at these meetings. These petitioners should have heeded Abraham Lincoln's admonition, in law, it is a good policy to never plead what you need not, lest you oblige yourself to prove what you cannot. In my opinion, that line between Jefferson's responsible citizen, who must alter or abolish unjust government, begins to fade into mere sedition when the lawful government justly exercises its power and is affirmed by the consent of the people. That is what we face here. I would recommend to my fellow board members that based upon the complete failure of these petitioners to plead and present any proper legal action, and based upon what I opine to be seditious intent, I would move to have our council seek not only attorney's fees from these petitioners, but also damages in the form of reimbursement to the Delaware County taxpayers for all the time spent by the employees forced to spend 9 or more hours defending this board's lawful practices against these spurious claims. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence, and Mr. Alberts.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Well said. I would make such a motion.
Was that a formal motion?
I would
Submit that in the form of a motion if appropriate.
I would want to check with Nick. I mean, this is the first
We do have a-
I'm hearing
yeah.
of this. Whether if this matter, if it
How about
does.
we do this, Mr. Allen? You raise a good point, but I am inclined to support such a motion. I'm going to say that publicly. Mr. Centrell, would you please collect your thoughts with the solicitor on a recommendation for the format of such a motion, as well as the different mechanisms under the law for filing such claims against the petitioners in that matter? I would appreciate a briefing on that from the solicitor before we tee it up for a formal motion, and that way, Mr. Allen, we could put it on an agenda for a later meeting.
Yes, Madam Chair, we'll do so.
Thank you for guessing correctly what my concern might be.
For the record, I just want to say I am in complete agreement with the sentiments expressed by both of my fellow board members. and would greatly appreciate that legal write-up as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Mr. Central, if there's any concerns about the need for timing such a motion to be soon, Mr. Allen, I would appreciate that if we could schedule a meeting to appropriately address that motion.
Madam Chair, we'll
So
look
that-
into trying to schedule something toward the end of next week, if that's okay with you.
If that's necessary timing, Mr. Central, after review the
We-
request.
We will review and make a recommendation, Madam Chair. I wouldn't want to have discussions that might implicate the attorney-client privilege on some of those issues.
Thank you. So please review the timing as well as the content. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair and Mr. Alves, for your indulgence.
Madam Chair, if I may, I just want to say, Mr. McBlain, you and I have often been on other side of political contests previous to our service here on this board. We may disagree on many matters of politics, morality, and whatever, but I'm very much in alignment with you on these points, and I particularly applaud your sense of ethics, fair play, and duty to bring the same approach we have to this, regardless of party. Elections matter, and we all care very passionately that they're done fairly, because my party might have the upper hand right now, but your party might have the upper hand tomorrow. And I want to make sure that no matter who has the upper hand, the process is fair, so that the will of the people can be properly expressed. So thank you for your commitment to this work and for volunteering to join the board.
Thank you, and you're right. I mean, no matter, we're appointed as a partisan office, but you're here to make sure that elections are conducted fairly. And just because you don't like the outcome doesn't mean that the process wasn't fair. I mean, cripes, I'm still waiting to vote to certify an election for somebody that I actually voted for. But just because I don't like the outcome of an election doesn't mean that the process wasn't fair, and people have to recognize that. And politically speaking, for people that, like I said, please aggressively scrutinize this board and our practices. That's your duty as Americans. But if you think that it's good politics just to cry fraud about elections, you're wrong, and we've been proven wrong in several elections now. So that's what I just urge those people, that if you're doing it for politics, please stop, because it doesn't work. So that's all I have. I'll stop.
It doesn't work, and it costs the taxpayers a great expense.
Yeah.
So the next meeting date will be at the call of the chair, and with that, there is no other business that the staff have to bring before the board at this time. So if there's a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, well, all those in favor say aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.